Dan Ives is Managing Director of Equity Research with Wedbush Securities, and he joins me from Westfield, New Jersey. Well, what do you think? The NASDAQ turned positive today after a really rough day. What are your thoughts about what's going on in the market, especially with tech?
Yeah, I think today was a capitulation day. It really important. I think you saw a lot of the risk off, really sort of hit in apex earlier in the day. And I think this is ultimately bullish for what I believe is going to be the start of a week of earnings in tech, especially Apple, Microsoft, you have Tesla, that's going to reverse a negative trend that we're seeing. So ultimately bullish. And I think today was one of those capitulation days that the institutional investors look for as maybe signs that we're starting to bottom.
Doesn't capitulation usually hold, though? And we're not seeing that. That doesn't concern you with the tech sector?
Look, I mean, it's going to be volatile, of course, over the coming days, weeks. But if you look here, we think it's oversold in terms of, especially in tech stock, many of these names are down 30, 40% to start the year. You're already factoring in 4 to 5 rate hikes. You got the Russia-Ukraine situation. It's a tightening and, of course, valuation centric. And I think you got to look at the fundamental stories. We're going through a fourth industrial revolution. Growth, I mean, just to give you some numbers, we're going for 25% growth for overall software going into this year. Typically, that's about 13 to 14%. Growth continues to be elevated going 2022.
There's just a lot of skepticism with, interest rate hikes around the corner that tech stocks can actually move higher in a rising rate environment. That skepticism has been playing out not just today, but over the past week or so.
Yeah, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because ultimately risk assets get thrown out. You start to see some rotation to value. And now what you're seeing now in this tightening environment, I think it's dislocated from fundamentals. I mean, covering tech stock 21 years in the street, I've seen many of these times where inflation hawks and you worry about Fed raising rates. It all comes down to look at the growth. It's unprecedented, the growth that we're seeing in cloud, names like Microsoft. You look at cybersecurity, that's another pocket. And then I look at names like Apple as well as some electric vehicle names like Tesla. I think this is a pivotal week that fundamentals now start to turn the tech sector higher.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the mega techs, the mega cap stocks do really well, but then there are a lot of names in the tech sector that need to be corrected that aren't making a profit. So we're seeing this rebalancing. I'm curious if you see EVs in the same light.
Look, I think you're starting to see some of the, we'll call it the weak hands or, especially some of these unprofitable names really get thrown to the wayside. But you can't necessarily paint it, the whole sector with that. You look, not just names like Tesla, but I think ways to play EV are names like Ford and GM in terms of re-rating names. And there's a lot of other plays out there in terms of names like Li-Cycle, which is a recycling EV name, and a bunch of others that are going to play into this $5 trillion of spending. And I think this creates the opportunity for investors. You have some of the froth come off in the market, which is ultimately healthy. But I do not believe this is the start of what I believe is going to be a secular negative turn for this bull market in tech. I just view it as a correction on a longer term trajectory, despite the Fed tightening.
So you mentioned some of the big industry players like Microsoft, Apple, Tesla are reporting earnings from the holiday quarter. These techs could either make things worse and rattle the markets more, or they can kind of soothe the markets. Where do you think things are going to land?
Yeah, I mean, Allison, I think it's the biggest week for tech earnings, potentially in the decade because of some of the white knuckles that you're seeing. And I believe it's going to be bullish, specifically Microsoft tomorrow night on cloud. You look at Apple coming on Thursday in terms of 5G and some of the chip shortage issues. And of course, Tesla coming Wednesday in terms of what we're seeing on this massive EV demand. I think this is really going to start to turn the tide.
All right, Dan Ives, Managing Director of Equity Research with Wedbush Securities. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.